And I want to welcome you to another episode of Beyond the Surface Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer. I'm seated in my office this evening looking at a headline that is just painful. Pennsylvania judge sentenced for 28 years for selling kids to the penal system. That's right. His name is Mark Cavanelli, and he is a 61-year-old judge who has been sentenced for nearly 30 years for literally selling juveniles for cash. In fact, they call his scandal Kids for Cash. So there were two companies who built two separate juvenile facilities in the Pennsylvania area. One of them was called PA Child Care. The other one was Western PA Child Care Detention Center. So part of what the judge was known for was being very punitive in his courtroom. And instead of working to give children alternative placement, alerting them to their rights to an attorney, advising them on the proper ways, to be represented, he simply sentenced them. And he took a pretty decent bribe. I mean, his kickback amounted to over more than $1 million. So he was convicted of accepting money in exchange for incarcerating thousands of adults and children into a prison facility that was owned by a developer. Some of the children were as young as 10 years old. Most of them were in there for minor crimes, petty theft, this kind of thing. Nothing really major. And it really didn't matter. There's a policy with many of these, because right now we're at a time, California has, 22 new prisons. It's built that many in the last 10, 20 years. That there's a policy of filling them. The developers don't want bids to be empty. They, in fact, were giving quite an incentive to have the bids filled. And what's interesting, I'm looking at a month of a lot of focus on the NFL. Domestic violence, very, very important and vital topic. Child abuse, no less important and vital. But just the constant making these two NFL players like the poster child for child abuse, the poster child for domestic violence, when in fact, in most cases, in my opinion, the NFL is in on it. They know whether or not their players are healthy or unhealthy, usually, especially in, not so much so with child abuse, but definitely with domestic violence. You know if this kind of behavior has been hinted at, seen. It's very, very hard at a certain point to disguise that when you're at that level. So here is a month of that. And I said, here, this judge, we're talking about an extension of the law. We're talking about someone that our children have to go in front of, adults have to go in front of, and we really rely on them for fairness and integrity, decency even, that is literally listening to your case and already cha-chinging, already looking at his pocketbook. Now, on one hand, this is shocking. For me, it's very painful and irritating because I've long believed that was part of what was happening in the black community. And I don't even want to limit it, I guess, to a certain degree to the black community, to impoverished people, to poor people in general. I speak about the black community because I'm black, and in many circumstances, because I've lived in Detroit, I grew up in Detroit, and I've lived in Chicago, I speak about what I know. So it's not to alienate anybody, because I understand that poor people who just don't have access and don't have knowledge, that similar things happen to them. So here we have this judge. And what the judge's situation has done is it's brought a face to a very real truth we've known for quite some time, that business has decided that it wants its hands to make profit out of prison. We know that prison, as much as it is about, or at least we're fed, that it's about securing our streets and putting those bad guys behind bars, that in fact a big chunk of the prison industry is driven for pure greed, for profit. So it brings me back to thoughts about C. Dolores Tucker. And then you're thinking, what does C. Dolores Tucker got to do with a conversation about a corrupt judge in Pennsylvania that has sold children to make money? Well, what C. Dolores Tucker has to do with it is one of the biggest venues to collect children has been through hip hop culture, through hardcore rap, and part of what I'm looking at is a connection between this great push to support criminalized thinking, backward thinking, misogynistic thinking by huge conglomerates. I mean, we're not talking about, you just got a couple of, really rich guys to back you. You're talking about the prison system being supported by, something like, like Viacom, Disney, BET, MTV, but also supporting hardcore rap, just the worst of hip hop. So how do you link up with the prison industry and accept a contract where they walk into the room and tell you that they're willing to do business with you as long as you can assure that they will have sufficient inmate population, and they want that inmate population to be maintained at 90%. These are not things I'm making up. These are things that are fact. One such corporation is Corrections Corporation of America, CCA. That's one of the biggest names in the private prison industry. And word has it, it's very well known that they contacted 48 states offering to buy their prisons, and with one stipulation. And the stipulation was that, look, you have to have the capacity to fill it up. Well, what would we fill prisons up with? We would have to find people, would we not? And that's scary, because my understanding is the goal is to have less people in prison, to have more productive, positive, decent, law-abiding citizens who have a healthy sense of self-regulation and a healthy moral compass. So we're looking for the scourge. Now, one of the things that the judge did was he picked minor incidents. Anything minor, it didn't matter. Almost everybody he sent to jail, I told you, were first-time offenders. They all did petty crimes. Some of them were actually victims of crimes, had fought back and those kind of scenarios, and they still found themselves behind jail. So, okay, let's shift gears. So I mentioned C. Dolores Tucker, who really fought diligently to keep underground rap, misogynistic, vulgar, violent lyrics out of the ears of children. And she understands that too much of that, any of that, actually spoils the child. That in fact you build a community where people think evil, backward. They begin, and we're seeing it now. We've seen where individuals literally try to act out these lyrics. And so C. Dolores Tucker, who's been dead maybe 10 years, warned us. She told us where this would go. Okay? So here we have proof that if you allow the worst of the worst to run rampant in your airways, and you give them a platform and you back them with a lot of money, that in fact impressionable minds, young minds, will actually not only listen to them, they'll follow them. And for some of them, for some young people, they'll worship them. they will actually worship at the altar. So there is a nice percentage of people that this has become, on many levels, their God. So one thing that happened was an anonymous letter was sent out to various members of the music and publishing industry. And what it did was it was given an account of a meeting where it was determined that hip-hop music would be manipulated to drive privatized prison profits. There's a really interesting website, if you want to read more about this, called Jailhouse Rock. Rock is ROC. And it talks about the facts about hip-hop and the prison. It's not the only website. There are tons of various sites, because this was kind of a standard understanding. This is a standard understanding in the hip-hop world that this letter existed. So the goal was to manipulate so that you could drive up the prison profits. And the individual apparently was some sort of industry insider, but for the most part kept quiet in order to keep himself employed. Okay, so here's our reality. 90% of what Americans read and listen to are controlled by 6 companies, 6 media companies. Those would be GE, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Warner Brothers, and CBS. Okay, we have what we know it to be 1,500 newspapers, 1,100 magazines, 9,000 radio stations, 1,500 TV stations, and 2,400 publishers. And guess what, folks? They're all run by these 6 corporations. And so there's a lot of puppeting, mind control going on. Now, it's not coming from me and you. You have to have different times looked at your television or listened to the airwaves and just been amazed. Like, they let them say that? Oh my God! Are they really displaying that? And then I was sitting back looking at the number of Disney stars who, upon capturing the attention of our children, all of a sudden shift to very explicit, very sexual, very over-the-top behavior, just real antisocial, bad behavior. I said, wow, so here you got your kids following this person, and they have flipped the script, all under the guise of, now I want to be grown, as if the transition, the rites of passage to adulthood is filth. Well, we have 6 major corporations, and they're conglomerate, that are controlling media, where the same folks that control that are also controlling music. They're running music. They're selecting who will be promoted and who will be pushed forward, who will we listen to, who children will be exposed to. Guess what, people? They also got a lot of money invested in prisons. They have a lot of money invested in prisons. So, one thing that the Corrections Corporation of America, which is associated with something called Vanguard Group Incorporated, Vanguard also holds a whole bunch of stock in media, and it is the 3rd largest holder in both Viacom and Time Warner. Vanguard is the 3rd largest holder in GEO Group, whose correctional detention and community reentry service boasts 101 facilities, approximately 73,000 beds, and 18,000 employees. They are second nationally only to Corrections Corporation of America, and GEO's facilities are located in the United States, not only in the United States, but also in the United Kingdom, Australia, in South Africa. They got prisons everywhere. They have prisons everywhere. They have beds waiting and ready. And remember, I started this podcast telling you that they want to keep those beds at 90%. 90%. Hands in the music industry, hands in entertainment, hands in the prison system. Okay. Process that a minute. So what you have is, you have basically an alarming overlap between private prison and mass media. That's what you have. And for parents like me, I've put a lot of effort in controlling what my children take in. My three older kids, they're older now. I have a 27-year-old, 18, and a 17-year-old. So I have less constraints, obviously. But I have a 4-year-old, and it's just certain stuff. Certain stations, we just don't even listen to. I'm so excited about the power of an iPod because I literally can have a playlist that I've already gone through and selected and put together for her. I realize that we raise our kids for the world and that she will not always be with me. But while she is with me, these 6 corporations, they won't own her mind. They won't make suggestive behavior for her. My 4-year-old will not be caught twerking. She won't be talking about how she make money, smoking blonde, nothing. We still on Disney. I'm talking about old Disney, where you singing dum diddly dum doo doo doo. We're at that level. Okay? Private prison, mass media. Guess what, people? That don't match. That should never be going together. Especially with the caveat of 90% capacity must be maintained. So one of the things that they do is when people go before the judge, there used to be a time you could plead your story, this, that, the other. A lot of times young people are getting time. And the quickest way to get people in trouble and give them a whole lot of time is through drugs. Now everybody know crack gets you a lot of time. Cocaine gets you a lot less. Black folks mixed with crack, white folks mixed with cocaine. So there's always been some disparity between the punishment between the two groups. Both of them using drugs. And I'm not saying one is right and the other is wrong. I'm saying this is the reality. Okay? We're going through the largest rise in incarceration that this country has ever seen. And it correlates precisely with the early 80s prison privatization. And this is happening in spite of the fact that actually crime rates were supposedly going down. They supposedly were going down. But we have a spike in prisons, not schools, not universities, not jobs, just prisons. And it all coincides with the war on drugs. That war on drugs started, and, everybody got to go to jail for a blunt. Everybody got to go to jail because they was caught with 1/4, 1/8 of, just ridiculous time, just filling up the jails with men and women. And again, a lot of it centered around crack cocaine. In July 2010, the Fair Sentencing Act was adopted, which, rather than reducing the crack/powder disparity from 100 to 10, it reduced it to 18 to 1, which is still unfair. And this is not to suggest that crack powder disparity represents the extent of the racism rampant in the incarceration industry. It's to suggest that even the title of the act, fair sentencing, is to suggest that it's still not fair. The truth is, it should be 1-to-1. You get caught with cocaine, you get caught with crack, you get the same punishment. And it never should be anything that's not centered at rehabilitation. Because at some point, folks come out of jail. The reality is that the U.S. Sentencing Commission reported in March 2010 that the federal prison system, even where convicted for the exact same crimes, people of color receive prison sentences 10% longer. Where convictions are identical, mandatory minimum sentences are also 21% more likely for people of color. And finally, let us not forget the wealth of evidence to support the notion that crime, drugs, and prison glorifying hip-hop only outsells other hip-hop because it receives so much exposure and financial backing. Here's the bottom line. Lupe, Common, I can't even think. There's a nice body of solid lyricists. They talk about culture, women, life, friendship, loyalty, all types of things. The original intent of hip hop. They don't get the backing of the Waka Flockas, the Lil Waynes, who oftentimes just fill the airwaves with misogyny, with violence, with disrespectful behavior, behavior that will lead you to jail. They conduct themselves in ways that's jail-like. Fighting at clubs, shootouts, tattoos on your face. All of these things that make you a target, that it don't ensure any kind of regular employment. Now, what regular people don't realize is that they're protected by the money and the fame. The average guy is not protected by that. So if he's walking in his community with tattoos on his face and his pants hang low, he's going to be in a fair amount of trouble. Is this a conspiracy theory? No, it's not a conspiracy theory. Any thinking human being, any sensitive thinking human being that's listened to the shift in hip-hop music, even since Tupac died. If you just, and listen, Tupac ain't my Jesus and he ain't my Moses either. But you can listen to the downward spiral of much of what runs across the radio. And then you look at the number of young people, girls drinking, violent acts against children, their children, the embracing of criminal behavior, shootouts, black on black crime. Much of it goes back to the programming that young people receive via media. Now let's get something straight. I'm not blaming media for every single problem. At the end of the day, I'm my child's role model and I'm responsible for my household. What am I saying? I'm saying that there is a concerted effort to dump as much filth into select people who are the scourge and give them opportunities that they never would have. And a big chunk of them are literally coming out of prison, dropping LPs, and the conglomerates are supporting them to ruin minds. And the result of it is we're living it. And we're living it, and we're filling up these prisons. And CCA are very satisfied. They're getting their 90% quota met. So we get back to where I started with. Pennsylvania judge, intelligent man, respected man, someone that we put our faith in every day, sentenced for selling children to the penal system. Wow. That's a lot to take in. But we need to take it in, break it down, and solve the problem. This is not one that needs to go under the rug. This is one that we should be buzzing about every single day. We need to be going through, looking at all these courtrooms, looking at all these cases where young people have not gotten a second try, a second shot at life. The stuff that was happening here was too extreme. He made too much money. To date, they've had to overturn 4,000 convictions. This judge was able to run his program for from 2003 to 2008. That's way too long, people. That's way too long to let a judge ruin, hurt, damage that many kids. Again, I told you that this is an important topic. It's a hurtful topic, but a very valuable topic. You need to do your research. You need to do your research. You've been listening to Beyond the Surface Radio, and I'm your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer. I hope you found this podcast valuable this evening. And until we chat again, be safe in God's grace.